Hey guys, I'm Espen Kraft, and today we're going to take a look at this issue of Keyboard Magazine. This is from March 1986, and it features a great article on Jean-Michel Jarre and his Zoolook album, orchestral maneuvers in the dark, Mr.Mister, and lots of cool, colorful ads. So tag along. And here it is. Issue March 1986, with a blurry picture of Jean-Michel Jarre, and an unreleased recording as well is supplied with this issue. Get back to that later. Also a piece on orchestral maneuvers in the dark and some programming clinics of the CZ101 from Casio, and a couple of reviews of a Korg and an Oberheim. I'll get back to that as well. And you know the drill by now? Korg always had the first couple of pages with ads in Keyboard Magazine back then. And here's the Korg DW8000, one of my favorites. I have lots of videos about that synth. This is a great color ad. I think this is one of the first ads for the DW8000. The DW6000 before it had already had its run of ads in Keyboard Magazine by this time. So this is the content of this issue. George from mr.mister is also featured in this issue. We'll get to that. Letters to the editor, always fun to read. There were always a couple of people complaining about previous released issues and the content of that. Master tracks from Passport, I can remember that, although I didn't use it myself. Up to the left, Joseph Zawinul, a legend in keyboard communities. And look at this giveaway that Keyboard Magazine gave away back then. A PPG 2.2, lexicon reverbs, mixers, Yamahas, the Memory Moog. I wonder if I can enter this contest now. Probably not. The Kawai K3. To the left here, half of it. And here's Steve George from mr.mister. If you remember Kyria and Broken Wings, 80s icon pop songs, he goes through what he used to make the sounds on that album. They used different drummers to get different feels, and he used an emulator, Roland Jupiter 8, Yamaha DX7, Geno 60, Fairlights. The keys he used the most are coming from a Prophet 600, he says. Combined with the DX7 through MIDI, he used that for almost all the sounds, including the Broken Wings hit single. That also has an emulator string sound and a Fairlight choir sample. And everything was sequenced to the Roland MSQ 700 sequencer. That was the first MIDI sequencer to hit the world. He also says he used a little bit of the QX1 from Yamaha. And here we have the sequential Prophet VS. That's Alan Reed up there to the left. Back to the VS. This is the predecessor to the Korg Wave Station and the Yamaha SY22, etc. It's funny, MIDI, the Prophet VS MIDI implementation is only matched by the Prophet 2000 sampler. They have that text in the ad, and that's cool. Hybrid Arts. Check out that Yamaha rig and the Atari. Check out that TX816 modules, 8 DX7s in a box, and that provides more heat than Chernobyl. MIDI Patcher. Dr. T's music software. Coming soon, DigiDesign sound designer software for the Prophet 2000 sampler. Maybe I should get that now for my 2000 sampler. Probably not. I have to fix my 2000 first. Have to make a living playing keyboards. That's relevant even today. If you want to make your living from playing keyboards, not as easy as it used to be. Thoroughbred music. Anyone used those back in the day? Please say so in the comment section. I love to hear people actually buying stuff from these places where I never got to visit because I'm from Norway. And check out those stands. That's an interesting one. Hybrid cases. JLC Cooper, they made a lot of MIDI gear back in the day. Goodman Music Keyboard Megastores. And here's another classic keyboard magazine clinic, how to program the CZ101 from Casio. I actually go through those same envelopes in my Casio FZ10 tutorial. Very complex and can do so much to alter the sound you're working on. Those clinics were always very fun and very interesting to read. Patrice Rushen, I don't know much about her, I'm sorry to say. Psycho made keyboards back in the day. Do you remember those? I used this briefly in a music store, never got to own it or play with it a lot. I don't think they make keyboards anymore. I'm actually wearing a Psycho watch right now. And here's a music computer I've always wanted to show on this channel, the Yamaha CX5 and CX5M. They never seem to surface around here, so it's hard to get those. But here's Jean-Michel Jarre and that article, the main feature of this issue. And this interview was conducted, this feature came right after his Zuluk album. And one of the tracks that didn't make that album, but was made for it, was this Moon Machine, which is provided with this issue of Keyboard Magazine on vinyl. And it's still attached to the magazine. That's very cool. I won't rip it out and play it for you because that'll ruin the value of this issue. On the back, there's a Kurzweil K250 demo track. And back to that track, Moon Machine, he says that all the music on it, it's made from the Fairlight CMI, and all the drums are from Lindrum and the Lin 9000, and he did use the ARP 2600 for the sequences. I think Zuluk is a great album. I probably hold it as one of my favorite Jean-Michel Jarre albums, probably because it uses a lot of sampling, voice samples, and he says that voice sampling was very important for this album. The Fairlight seems to be his sampler of choice, and he uses that a lot to record both vocal chants from Asia and other stuff he's working on, or worked on for that Zuluk album. The Oberheim Matrix 6 and the Akai S612 sampler, very cool. A Lexicon PCM70 reverb unit. And the Michel Jarre interview goes on here. Syntek, the professional's choice, musician's dream. Software for the C64, Apple, IBM. He tells about how it was to play in China back then. He'd already been doing that in 1986, and he says that the power supplies, the power grids, were very unreliable. So the power would come and go, and it was a lot of trouble actually getting power for all his gear. If you're a younger guy watching this and you don't know much about Jean-Michel Jarre, he was a pioneer in those very big gargantuan setups with lasers and everything back in the day. And I can only imagine the power requirements back then and how cumbersome it must have been to get that in places like China. That SP1200 sampler shown briefly in the previous page. And here's a very interesting feature on Orchestral Maneuvers in the Dark, a pioneer synth band from Britain. And in 1986, they actually opened around the US for the Thompson Twins. And they didn't have any sounds checks or anything. They just had to go on stage with their gear and perform. That's kind of strange because OMD was very big themselves back then. And I don't know why they opened for the Thompson Twins. But anyways, this article Shows a lot of their cool gear, emulator 2s, Jupiter 8s. And the funny thing is that OMD, they still tour today, but the Thompson twins, not so much. That said, I love Thompson twins. I listen to them weekly. The Akai AX60, very cool VCO synth. Pretty hard to get actually today. And here's the patches of the month. I always read this very carefully, although I didn't have many of the synths featured at that time. And that CZ1 patch is made by none other than Eric Pershing, so that's highly interesting. A Fairlight type sound. I'll make a scan of this and put in the video description as a link for anyone interested. Patches by Eric Pershing is always worthy of a good scan. Little feature on digital sampling and how higher bandwidth makes for a better sample. That depends on how you see it today. I like those gritty low bandwidth samples myself. Mind over MIDI. Remember, MIDI was very new back then, so there was a lot of MIDI clinics and MIDI articles in every music tech magazine. More on envelopes. Envelopes are very underrated by many for making sounds. They can alter the sounds very much. And here are the reviews, always on the last pages of Keyboard Magazine. The Oberheim Matrix 6 gets a very good review. The more you use it, the more you like it, he says, his conclusions. The Korg DW8000 also gets favorable reviews. It's a lot of fun going through this magazine with you, I must admit. I've said so before, but I love these videos myself. I love making these. Takes me back to so many places emotionally. And I can almost smell the 80s. And this magazine smells a lot itself. Smells of an old attic. But that's a nice smell. I love a good attic odor. Emulator 2, discs for sale. And here's the Lin music sequencer. Did anyone actually use this? I'm very curious. Please say so in the comment section if you have one or used it or use it today. Can't recall I've ever seen one in real life, actually. Some small spec sheets for new gear. The Synth Encyclopedia, the whole synthesizer catalog. The DX, of course, that was so much in style back then. Micro Music. Grandma's. Electronics music dealer. That's a cool name, Grandma's. And the Mirage, of course, a very affordable sampler back then compared to those big boys. And the Keyboard Classifieds and Oberheim with its product line back then. Matrix 12, the DMXs, Matrix 6, Expander. Love to have all those. And the last page, Yamaha, always back then, the Rev 7. And that was Keyboard Magazine, issue March 1986. Thank you so much for watching. Oh, and one more thing. I want to say a big thanks to all you guys out there that supports me on Patreon and on PayPal, because your donations makes it a lot more easy for me to make all this content and videos on a regular basis. So thanks, guys. And a very special thanks goes out to Anders Jensen, David Ryle, Felix Bowman, Jan Tuchek, Carl Bate, Nathan Furman, Rich Jones, Tail Trap, Teddy McSnuggins, Matt Phillips, and Creating Tracks. Thanks again, guys.